Welcome to the D100 Advocate. I'm Brent, and today I want to revisit low fantasy gaming. A few years ago, I recorded a fairly incomplete review, always with the intention of revisiting it at some point. Time has definitely gotten away from me, but it's time to get back to it and to this channel. Low fantasy gaming is a tabletop RPG based on Dungeons & Dragons. In terms of rules complexity and design ethos, it sits comfortably between OSR titles or classic D&D and the more modern D&D 5e. It's a D20-based roll-under system with an emphasis on dark and dangerous magic and sandbox play. It's setting agnostic, though the author Steve does have a separate setting made for the system called the Midlands that reminds me a little bit of Robert E. Howard's Hyboria. Most of the system has been tweaked to give a more low fantasy sword and sorcery feel over the more high fantasy approach that D&D 5e strives for. The game features 5 of the 6 typical attributes usually found in D&D. Wisdom is replaced with 2 attributes, willpower and perception. While that change may be a little divisive for some, I found it to be a rather welcome change from 5e. Additionally, a special attribute, luck, has been added. Traditional and modern approaches to saving throws have been thrown out the window in favor of a new system based on the luck attribute. Like other attributes in the game, a d20 is used and success requires rolling under or equal to your current luck. On a success, your character avoids whatever fate was before them, but their luck attribute is temporarily reduced by 1, making future saving throws more difficult over time. Luck regenerates by 1 point per long rest. The game provides a skill system with approximately 24 defined skills. They provide a +1 bonus to the target number of an attribute check. Characters are not granted all skills, however. What skills a character has access to is defined by their class, and all characters gain a skill of their choice at levels 4 and 8. While low fantasy gaming is written with the expectation that most sword and sorcery games are going to be human-centric, it does provide additional races for those who prefer that style of play. Dwarves, elves, and halflings make an appearance, as does a unique race to the system, the Half-Scorn. Scorn are a large pink-skinned proto-human race that are typically cannibalistic in nature. They feature rather prominently in the Midlands, and they feel a lot like a replacement for orcs as they fill a similar niche. Classes are your typical fantasy fare, with your clerics being replaced by cultists, as is pretty typical of sword and sorcery. The system features artificers, barbarians, bards, cultists, fighters, magic users, monks, rangers, and rogues. While the classes and defined abilities presented in the game are typical of D&D, the unique features that characters gain at levels 3, 6, 9, and 12 are not. At these levels, players, with the help of the GM, get to create unique features or abilities for their characters. The book does provide plenty of guidance and examples here, so the GM nor the players are left scratching their beards trying to determine how to make abilities that are not too powerful or provide too little utility. Like most D20 games, low fantasy gaming includes critical strikes which deal maximum damage. Most weapons in the game also provide an additional benefit on a natural 19. Common examples include requiring the target to roll on the injuries and setbacks table, knocking the target prone, or causing the target to go last in the turn order in the next round. This is great fun for players, but monsters often have special abilities that trigger on a natural 19 as well. Beware of dragons. My favorite part of the system must be martial exploits. In most modern D&D systems, the optimal approach in combat is always to do damage, cast some sort of save or die or save or suck spell, or to buff or heal your party. As a result, even when players want to do something improvised in combat via their skills, attributes, or some other ability, they don't. There's this fear of missing out on doing something useful or wasting resources on your turn. This is very different from old school play where improvisation was often required, especially at early levels, as direct confrontation had a high likelihood of simply getting a character killed. Low fantasy gaming, sitting somewhere between old school gaming and modern approaches, provides a really compelling middle ground in the form of a mechanic called martial exploits. Martial exploits are special maneuvers that allow you to still make an attack and attempt some additional benefit. A martial exploit requires a character to first hit their opponent and cause damage as normal. However, the player can then request an additional effect. These require an opposed roll of some sort. As an example, if my character were to hit my opponent, I may request to throw sand in their eyes to blind them for a round. The GM will then require an opposed dexterity check to succeed. Rescue exploits allow players to attempt to rescue or negate an effect on another player as a reaction on another player's turn. Rescue exploits require not only a dexterity check to determine if the character gets there in time, but a luck check to see if they succeed in negating the effect. Together, I've found that in practice, these exploits allow for a very dynamic and cinematic approach to combat. My games have been significantly better for having them. Let's see what a martial exploit might look like in practice. Our hero, Grognar the Barbarian, has just come upon this unsuspecting little goblin. Poor thing. Grognar has just succeeded on a stealth check, and decides, I shouldn't fight this thing, not if I can avoid it. So I'm going to sneak up on it, quietly, and stab it in the back. Grognar attacks! Let's see how he rolls. Grognar is attacking with a greatsword, and must hit an AC of 10. That is an AC of 24, and does 7 damage. Not quite enough to kill our goblin, but pretty close. Grognar, thinking quickly, I'm gonna kick him off this thing. Off this little cliff here. It won't kill him, or at least it probably won't, but it might give me an advantage in the next round. As the GM, I determine that Grognar needs to make a strength check, opposed by the goblin's dexterity check. So let's see what happens. Grognar makes a strength check, and that is a success. Let's see how the goblin fares. Ooh, this is a roll under system, so that is actually a critical failure. Grognar succeeds, and Grognar makes a mighty kick and knocks this poor goblin right off the cliff. And that'll be the end of the round. Low Fantasy Gaming really makes an attempt at emulating the sword and sorcery genre where magic is rare, corrupting, and dangerous. It's rarely ever just a good thing. There's almost always a consequence. Low Fantasy Gaming emulates this with a special statistic, the Dark and Dangerous Magic Threshold. It's a special attribute that starts at 1. Whenever a character casts a spell, a d20 is rolled. If that d20 rolls over your threshold, the spell goes off without a hitch and your threshold is increased by 1. On the other hand, if that d20 lands on a number equal to or under the Dark and Dangerous Magic threshold, your threshold is reset to 1, and a roll on the Dark and Dangerous Magic table is made. Almost every result on this table has some sort of dangerous effect on the caster, the party, or everyone around the caster. It's absolutely glorious in play. Monster stat blocks in the game most closely resemble the old stat blocks from the D&D basic lineup, with a few tweaks. Monsters use luck for saves, just like the player characters. They also get their own special abilities on a natural 19. All in all, these stat blocks are easy to use and incredibly easy to improvise when necessary. They've always been my preference when running D&D games. If you want to get your feet wet with the system, there's a free version of the game on the Low Fantasy Gaming website. I'll link it down in the doobly-doo. Low Fantasy Gaming is a great middle ground between old school and modern play. If you want a system that's more simple than D&D 5e, or you want to ease your players into an OSR style of play, Low Fantasy Gaming is likely going to be perfect for your needs. It shines with sandbox play and episodic-like content. Personally, I steal mechanics from Low Fantasy Gaming, especially martial exploits, when running most OSR games. It's as great as a toolbox as it is a game. I highly recommend it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.